Elvis arrived early for sound check, when he heard the most beautiful voice echoing through the empty arena. When he tracked it down, he found a janitor with a mop in one hand and a dream in his heart. And everything changed. It was March 15th, 1975, at Madison Square Garden in New York City, and Elvis had arrived 3 hours earlier than usual for his sound check. He couldn't sleep in his hotel room and decided to come to the venue early to work through some new arrangements with his band. As Elvis walked through the backstage corridors at 2 a.m., the arena was completely empty except for the overnight cleaning crew. The massive venue that would hold 20,000 screaming fans in just 18 hours was now a tomb of silence, with only the distant hum of industrial cleaning equipment breaking the stillness. That's when he heard it. A voice, rich, powerful, and hauntingly beautiful, echoing through the empty arena. Someone was singing, "Love Me Tender," Elvis's own song, but singing it in a way that made it sound brand new. Elvis stopped dead in his tracks, his heart racing. In 20 years of performing, he'd heard thousands of people sing his songs, but this voice was different. This voice had something he'd rarely heard: pure, untrained soul. Following the sound, Elvis made his way through the backstage maze toward the main arena. The voice grew stronger as he got closer, and Elvis could feel goosebumps rising on his arms. Whoever was singing had never had professional training. Elvis could tell that immediately, but they had something that couldn't be taught: heart. When Elvis reached the entrance to the main arena floor, he peered around the corner and saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. There, center stage under a single work light, was a black man in his 50s wearing a gray janitor's uniform. He had a mop in one hand and was slowly cleaning the stage while singing "Love Me Tender" with a voice that could have filled Carnegie Hall. But he wasn't just singing, he was performing, moving with the music, feeling every word, putting his whole soul into a song that he thought only the empty seats could hear. Elvis stood in the shadows, mesmerized. This man, this janitor, was singing Elvis's song better than Elvis had ever sung it himself. The janitor's name was Samuel Washington, though Elvis didn't know that yet. Samuel was 53 years old and had been working the night shift at Madison Square Garden for 15 years. Every night, he cleaned the stages where the world's biggest stars performed, mopping up the sweat and tears of dreams come true, while nursing his own dreams that he'd given up on decades ago. Samuel had wanted to be a singer since he was a child in Mississippi, the son of sharecroppers who couldn't afford music lessons or instruments. He'd sung in church choirs, performed at local talent shows, and even auditioned for a few record labels in the 1940s and 50s. But being a black man in the music industry during those times meant facing barriers that seemed impossible to overcome. So Samuel had taken a job as a janitor, married his high school sweetheart, raised 3 children, and buried his musical dreams. But he never stopped singing. Every night, alone in whatever venue he was cleaning, Samuel would perform for an audience of empty seats, keeping his voice strong and his dreams alive, even though he'd convinced himself they'd never come true. Elvis watched Samuel finish "Love Me Tender" and start into "Can't Help Falling in Love." The man's voice was incredible, not technically perfect, but filled with the kind of emotion and authenticity that Elvis spent his whole career trying to capture. Without thinking about it, Elvis stepped out of the shadows and began walking slowly across the arena floor toward the stage. Samuel was so lost in his performance that he didn't notice Elvis until he was almost at the stage steps. When he saw the unmistakable figure of Elvis Presley walking toward him, Samuel nearly dropped his mop. "Oh my God," Samuel whispered, his face going pale. "Mr. Presley, I'm sorry, sir. I know I shouldn't be. I was just cleaning, and..." "Don't you dare apologize," Elvis said, his voice gentle but firm. "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in 20 years of making music." Samuel stood frozen, clutching his mop like a lifeline. Here was Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, standing in front of him in an empty Madison Square Garden at 2 a.m. "What's your name, sir?" Elvis asked, climbing the steps to join Samuel on stage. "Samuel Washington." Samuel managed to say, "Samuel Washington. That's a strong name. How long have you been singing like that?" "All my life, sir, but I'm just a janitor. I clean up after real performers like you." Elvis looked Samuel directly in the eyes. "Samuel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. You're not just anything. You have one of the most beautiful voices I've ever heard." Samuel started to shake his head, but Elvis continued. "I've sung with professional singers, backup vocalists, recording artists from all over the world. And what I just heard from you, that wasn't just singing, that was music from the soul." "Samuel, can I ask you something?" Elvis said. "Have you ever recorded anything? Ever performed professionally?" Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "I tried, back in the 50s, auditioned for a few labels. But, well, it was a different time then. They said I had talent, but what? But they said there wasn't a market for someone like me." Elvis felt anger rising in his chest. He'd heard stories like this before, incredible talent wasted because of prejudice and narrow-mindedness in the music industry. Samuel, that was their loss, and it was the world's loss. "But it's not too late. Mr. Presley, I'm 53 years old. I've got 3 kids, a mortgage, responsibilities, and you've also got a gift that needs to be shared." Elvis made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Samuel, I want to ask you to do something for me. Tomorrow night, I'm performing here for 20,000 people. I want you to join me on stage." Samuel's mop clattered to the floor. "What? I want you to sing with me, in front of all those people." "Mr. Presley, I can't. I mean, I'm not a professional. I don't have the right clothes. I don't know how to handle crowds." "Samuel, you don't need to know how to handle crowds. You just need to sing the way you were singing just now. That's all. The rest doesn't matter." Samuel was terrified. "What if I mess up? What if people laugh? What if I embarrass you?" Elvis put his hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Samuel, let me tell you something. I've been performing for 20 years, and I still get nervous before every show. Fear is part of it. But you know what's worse than fear? Regret." Elvis looked around the empty arena. "You've been singing to empty seats for 15 years. Tomorrow night, you can sing to 20,000 people who will appreciate what you have to offer. Which do you think you'll regret more, trying and maybe failing, or never trying at all?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the thousands of empty seats that he'd been his only audience for so many years. "What would I sing?" he asked quietly. Elvis smiled. He knew Samuel was going to say yes. "Whatever you want. But I have a suggestion. How about we do Love Me Tenders together? The way you were singing it just now was perfect. Together, like a duet, like partners, like 2 musicians who love music and want to share it with people." Samuel took a deep breath. "Mr. Presley." "Elvis, okay. Yes. I'll do it." The next day was a whirlwind of preparation. Elvis had his people find Samuel a suit that fit properly. They arranged for him to come to sound check so he could get comfortable with the microphone and the stage setup. But the most important preparation happened when Elvis sat down with Samuel and talked to him about performing. "Samuel, when you're up there tomorrow night, I want you to remember something. Those people aren't coming to judge you. They're coming to feel something, to be moved by music. And your job isn't to be perfect. It's to be honest." Elvis could see that Samuel was still nervous. "You want to know a secret?" Elvis continued. "The best performances I've ever given were the ones where I forgot about being Elvis Presley and just focused on the music. Tomorrow night, don't think about being Samuel Washington, the janitor. Just be Samuel Washington, the musician." The next night, Madison Square Garden was packed with 20,000 Elvis fans who had no idea they were about to witness music history. Elvis was about an hour into his set when he stopped and walked to center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share something special with you tonight. Last night, I discovered one of the most incredible voices I've ever heard. This voice belongs to a man who's been working in this building for 15 years, making sure it's clean and ready for performers like me." The audience was intrigued, but confused. "His name is Samuel Washington, and he's going to help me sing Love Me Tender the way it was meant to be sung." Elvis gestured toward the wings, and Samuel walked onto the Madison Square Garden stage in front of 20,000 people for the first time in his life. What happened next was pure magic. Elvis began playing Love Me Tender on his acoustic guitar, and when Samuel joined in, his voice filled the entire arena with a power and beauty that left everyone speechless. The audience, who had come to see Elvis, found themselves captivated by this unknown man whose voice carried decades of dreams, disappointments, and hope. Samuel sang like his life depended on it, which in a way it did. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. But it wasn't just polite applause. It was genuine appreciation for incredible talent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said, "Samuel Washington has been hiding his light under a bushel for too long. What do you think? Should the world get to hear more of this voice?" The response was overwhelming. 20,000 people on their feet, cheering for a man they'd never heard of 5 minutes earlier. That night changed everything for Samuel Washington. Within a week, he had 3 recording contract offers. Within a month, he was in the studio making his first album. Within 6 months, he was headlining his own shows. But more importantly, Samuel had rediscovered the part of himself he'd buried decades ago. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a musician, an artist, a person whose dreams had value. "Elvis didn't just give me a career," Samuel said in interviews years later. "He gave me back my identity. He reminded me that it's never too late to be who you were meant to be." The story of Elvis discovering Samuel Washington became legendary in music circles. It proved that incredible talent could be found anywhere, even mopping floors at 2 a.m. Samuel went on to have a successful recording career, specializing in gospel and R&B music that showcased the soulful voice Elvis had discovered that night. He never forgot his roots, often performing at venues where janitors and cleaning crews worked, telling them that dreams don't have expiration dates. Elvis and Samuel remained friends until Elvis's death in 1977. They recorded several songs together, and Elvis would often talk about the night he discovered that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. The story of Elvis and Samuel Washington reminds us that talent exists everywhere, often in people who've been overlooked or dismissed. It shows us the importance of listening, really listening, to the people around us. It also demonstrates that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. Samuel was 53 when Elvis discovered him, but his best years as a musician were still ahead of him. On March 15, 1975, Elvis Presley arrived early at Madison Square Garden and heard a janitor singing in an empty arena. Instead of walking by, he listened. Instead of ignoring, he investigated. Instead of dismissing, he embraced. Samuel Washington had been cleaning stages for 15 years, watching other people live their dreams while he mopped up after them. In one night, Elvis transformed him from a janitor who sang to empty seats into a recording artist whose voice would touch millions. The most beautiful part of this story isn't that Samuel became famous. It's that he remembered he was a musician. For too many years, he'd forgotten that the man with the mop was also the man with the gift. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen at 2 a.m. in empty arenas, when someone has the courage to investigate a beautiful sound and the wisdom to recognize that talent doesn't come with credentials, it comes with heart. If this incredible story of hidden talent being discovered moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone whose talents deserve recognition. Have you ever had a hidden dream that you thought was too late to pursue? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the moments when dreams finally get their chance to shine.